Today we're here to talk about attendance, supporting student attendance, connecting today and excelling tomorrow. I am Mackenzie Rydell. I am one of 3 social emotional behavior learning specialists with Nebraska MTSS. And my background is school psychology, and I'll let our other SEBLs introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Gunther. I'm another one of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists. And I serve regions 3 and 4. So we have the ESUs up there that I serve. It's 1, 7, 8, and then 9, 10, 11, and 17. My background is a speech language pathologist and then special education leadership.
Hello, everyone. Emily Arkfeld. I am the 3rd SEBL specialist. I serve Region 5, the Panhandle, ESUs 13, 15, and 16. And my previous work was as a school social worker.
Awesome. Thank you for introducing yourself. So if you haven't heard of us before, our position is relatively new. We've been at this work for a little over a year, but we are grant funded, project personnel. So we work for Nebraska MTSS, but our funds go through the Center for Research on Children, Youth, Families, and Schools through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. But we provide training and implementation support around really anything SEBL, whether that's exploration and planning, adult, student, tier, universal kind of core supports, and then those tiered supports with tiers 2 and 3. And if you want to learn anything more about what we do, we have a link in our PowerPoint about our position and also our other team members as well. We have a whole team here that helps support systematic implementation for school improvement. But now we want to know a little bit about you all. So we're going to do a welcoming inclusion activity. If you haven't heard of the starfish story, I'll just read it here. It's on the screen. Every day, an old man walked along the beach with a pail, picking up starfish that had been washed in by the tide and throwing them back into the sea. One day, a young boy stopped the old man and asked, "Why do you throw the starfish back? It doesn't matter. They'll only wash up on the shore again tomorrow." The old man picked up the starfish out of his pail, threw it as far as he could into the sea, and replied, "It mattered to that one." As educators, we know that you don't always see the result. You don't always see the gratification of the hard work you put in every day. But we all know that we make a big difference every day. So we want to do a little waterfall activity. So if you want to pick one name, it can be initials or just the first name of a student that you've impacted in some way this year or this past year, or maybe just one that sticks out through your whole career. And you can throw those in the chat and we'll see them all flood in there. So we have names coming in the chat, and obviously we all don't know the meaning behind those names, but you personally do. Just goes to show. You can scroll through a little bit, and that's just one student for each of us, but think of all the impact we've had with all the students that we've impacted. Also, if you don't mind, you can introduce yourself in the chat. You can put your name, maybe your position. We would love to help connect anybody that's here around this topic. But today, where we're heading is we're going to talk a little bit about student attendance, why it matters, what are some of those barriers to school attendance, and what schools can do. So, why does attendance matter? Well, we know that students who are chronically absent miss critical learning opportunities, miss those instructional time, and chronic absenteeism is a better predictor of school dropout than low grades or poor test scores. So really, we want our students in school. We all know this. We want them here. We want them getting that instruction, getting that interaction, and those experiences to learn and grow, not only as academic students, but also as people that will eventually become part of our community and our society. When we talk about chronic absence, we want to distinguish the difference between truancy and chronic absence. So when we think of truancy, we're only counting those unexcused absences, whereas chronic absence counts all absences, whether it's excused, unexcused, being suspended, or really missing any instructional time, being late, chronically late, things like that. Truancy emphasizes compliance with school rules, whereas chronic absenteeism or chronic absence addresses and emphasizes the academic impact of those missed days, those missed instructional minutes. Truancy relies on legal and administrative solutions, whereas chronic absenteeism kind of takes some of those positive, proactive approaches and uses and dips into community resources. And then chronic absenteeism, when we talk about this, it is 10% or more of membership within your school. So if a student is with you from the first day of school to the last day of school, that would be 10% of those days. But also thinking about it where if a student joins you into second quarter and they miss a couple days early on of their time at their building, those numbers wouldn't necessarily be the same because they weren't your student, they weren't a member of your school community for the whole school year. So just the time that they're enrolled in your building. And if we only focus on truant students, we miss those opportunities to intervene early, and we miss some students that are struggling with attendance where we can really intervene early, get some proactive strategies, maybe help get them at school and create a safer community for them to be at school before they're missing 15, 20, 30 days. Chronic absenteeism is a better predictor of school dropout than low grades or poor standard test scores. I already mentioned this, but we also want to think about absenteeism as a measure of equity. Research shows that students who miss 10% or more of their school days perform worse academically and typically have worse life outcomes, whether that mean jail time or unemployment or needing public assistance. But in Nebraska specifically, and also in other places, other states as well, we see similar trends of students of color, students with disabilities, English learners, and students coming from low socioeconomic status are more likely to be chronically absent in school. In the 2021-2022 school year, 77,000 students were chronically absent, which is about 23% of students in our state. This compares to the 2018-2019 data, where only about 45,000 students or 14% of students were chronically absent. I'm sure that we have all seen the impact of COVID around mental health, but also we see the impact of student attendance as well. You're probably noticing the same thing in your schools. So let's talk about some barriers to student school attendance. Okay, so this first slide here, there's a lot of words on it. We'll go through it, but I think it could be a good resource if you're on an attendance team, almost to use it as a checklist or something to really check back to see what supports are you doing, and if there anything here that maybe you haven't considered that you could search into a little bit further. So some of the barriers, one of the obvious ones we think about is the physical or mental illness, both chronic and acute. This goes for our students, but also for our families. Sometimes we see students who may have severe anxiety or depression, or they're struggling with substance abuse and they're not coming to school. But also sometimes we see parents who are having some mental health concerns, and that might be a barrier to the student coming to school. Lack of health, mental health, vision, or dental care. Sometimes as school professionals, we might have access to those things and they might not seem like they would be barriers since we're able to access those. But if you're unable to get the care that you need to stay healthy and to be present, it is hard. Trauma affects our communities in more ways than we can imagine. It also filters into our attendance. Unsafe path to or from school, which goes right into that transportation. Are they able to get to school? Are they able to get home from school? Thinking about frequent moves or school changes, involvement in the welfare or juvenile justice. And we talked a little bit about socioeconomic factors. When we think of negative school experience, you might think of students who are struggling academically, but also what about those students who are struggling socially or might be bullied? If we're suspending and expelling students, they're outside of the classroom, out of that instructional time, but they're not learning those skills that they might need to really be present in school and to be in attendance at school. Maybe they have a parent or a caregiver or family members who have had negative school experiences, and they might have negative attitudes towards education and the educational experience. Maybe they have an undiagnosed disability or lack of appropriate accommodations for disability that could be addressed in the school setting. Thinking about lack of engagement as a barrier. Maybe we're having a lack of culturally relevant, engaging instruction, relationships with adults. We all know people who feel connected and belong in the school environment are typically the ones that are enjoying, that are really excited to come to school and be at school every day. Having stronger ties with peers outside of school than in school, not feeling welcomed or having a welcoming school climate. Maybe there's a failure to earn credits, or they don't have a plan for their future or what that might look like, or they don't see how school aligns with their future plans. And then teacher absence and long-term subs can also play an engagement in lack of engagement in the school setting. And then some misconceptions about attendance. Absences are only a problem if they're unexcused. We kind of addressed this earlier with the truancy versus chronic absenteeism. But really we want our students in school as much as possible. If they aren't in school, even if it is an excused absence, they're still not in school and getting that rich instructional experience, whether it be academic or socially. And that kind of goes with the other misconceptions of missing a couple days a month here and there. It doesn't really matter. Sporadic attendances aren't a problem, and attendance only matters in the older grades. We want our students in school, we want them learning, we want them interacting with their peers, with their adults, etc. And just another, a note that behavior and attendance issues from schools typically are a complex mix of many of these factors. You might have some mental health things, you might have some medical things going on, some family things, that usually there's not just one thing that's going on. And so just thinking about all the things that might be working together to create this problem. For the common reasons for school refusal are avoiding situations that cause negative emotions and feelings. This goes right along with that mental health, fear, anxiety, depression, physical complaints. It may be to escape some evaluative situations, maybe like a test or speech or a big athletic performance that is causing some stress. For younger kids, we typically, this one's most common for younger kids, of reducing separation anxiety. A lot of times This comes out in what looks like as attention-seeking behavior. And then maybe to pursue a desired activity like watching TV, playing video games, and hanging out with friends. But again, these, while they might be some common reasons, it is really important to dig a little bit deeper and really look towards some of that root cause of why they're missing. Mental health, we've talked about a little bit already. Mental health does have a big impact. A lot of students have some aspect of poor mental health if they're missing. So we wanted to throw in these risk and protective factors. Each section is a different area. So this left one is those child risk and protective factors. That middle one is family, and then school and community. So some of those things within the child might be low self-esteem or negative thinking styles or poor communication and social skills, but buffering that with protective factors of teaching good social emotional skills and communication skills and positive attitudes. As a family, we might not be able to control all of these things like instability, discipline practices at home, mental illness or substance abuse within the home. But as a school, we can really help create that positive, welcoming school climate, make people feel loved, belong, connected within the school building, and then have a sense of safety and teach some of that mental health promotion to buffer some of those risk factors. And then we can't forget about our community. Our schools are part of community, so really thinking about how can we tap into the resources our community offers to help with some of those risk and protective factors. And then when we think of mental health, we want to think of it on a continuum. We all have some mental health. Everybody has mental health. Not everybody has mental illness. But when we think of that continuum, if you're higher on the wellness side, typically you have more protective factors, coping strategies, and you're not necessarily seeing impact from your mental health and your ability to function in everyday life. And then the further you get into that mental illness is where you're seeing more impact in your everyday life, whether that be impact with school performance, whether that be those daily living activities or social situations. But we all fall somewhere on the continuum, and it kind of can change throughout time based on the resources and supports that are available. And this last picture that I wanted to share here is just a really good visual reminder. We want our kids in school, we want them learning, we want them on time. That is ideal, but we can't forget that our students sometimes really just need to be acknowledged that they're here, because they can go through, there's a lot of things going on outside that we might not know about that are creating some barriers and some difficulties to be fully present in school. So as you can see here, this kid who is at school says, "Can someone please help me with these? I'm late for class." But he's dealing with abuse, mental health, neglect, homelessness, hunger, poverty, all of those that he's carrying with him as he's entering the school building. So we're gonna go on and talk a little bit about what schools can do.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Thanks for just giving us that nice overview and reminder of all of that plays into attendance and absenteeism. So now what can we do about it? When we think about addressing attendance, we want to really think about what systems do we already have in place to do that. So what do we already have in place to help support our staff and our students? And we are Nebraska MTSS, and we do believe everything is systems focused. And so through that, we have these 6 essential elements that we believe when our systems are built with these in mind, then we have the best success, or we're setting ourselves up for the best success for our students and our staff. So these are live links on the PDF. If you don't know about them and want to learn a little bit more, they are pretty much at face value. They are what they say they are, but if you want to dive deeper into that, you can do that. And when we think, so Mackenzie laid all of those barriers out so nicely, and in that graph with the, different areas that it might play. We want to think about all of that when we're problem solving for our students when they're having absenteeism. And so looking at what's going on with the student, but also like how is that student functioning within their school and the district and the community, and what supports are in place and what barriers are in place. And so making sure we have the right people at the table with all of those pieces of information, so that when we sit down to problem solve, we're really maximizing our time and having everything we need to come to the table and help support that student. And in doing that, we have to remember that what works for some students is not going to work for all students. So a blanket truancy policy with some supports and some resources in place isn't necessarily going to be right for everyone. So again, having all those people at the table with the right information to paint that picture of what's going on, to make sure that the supports that we are putting in place for the students and their families are what that student and that family needs. And a reminder that our supports are tiered, not our students. So if we have a student with truancy issues, that doesn't mean that they are automatically a tier 2 student. If they are fantastic in their social skills and their science and their reading comprehension, fantastic. We just might need to layer some of those things, find out what's going on, what are those unmet needs and those barriers, and how do we help address those regarding attendance, while also bolstering and boosting up all of those strengths that the student does come with. So really we want to build our core, our strong core, so that all students are getting the same things regarding, really we're building that culture and that climate for those students to want to come and be a part and feel connected to our schools. So using that team approach I talked about earlier, we'll talk about it later, but making sure we have all of the people at the table in building our core and our tiered supports, establishing those predictable routines, and then also communicating clearly about schedules and expectations. So when kids know what to expect, when kids know what happens when they miss a class or miss a day, then there's less anxiety about what happens for them. And so they are more likely to come to school when they walk in knowing what to expect. Promoting those enrichment activities and clubs, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but finding out what are our student interests and what do they need and how do we build that into their day so that they want to be there and feel connected and that they belong. Addressing any school safety issues that might come up, doing that at the core for all students. Creating homerooms and advisory groups so that they have the consistent adult, those consistent peers, hopefully throughout either their elementary career and secondary, whether that's middle or high school. And so they know I can go to this person. They might have a stronger relationship with them because they have put in the time and the effort to get to know them on a different level than maybe some of the other teachers have. Utilizing a universal screener for early identification. So we are not going to be able to hit all kids just based on grades and attendance and office referrals. And so using those screeners to see if there is anything that we're missing and then helping to build those supports for those students as well. Personalizing communication when absences occur. I think we'll talk about this a little bit later also, but when you have relationships with students and their families, it's not just an automatic email that gets sent out at 5 days or the attendance letter that gets sent out at 20 days, but having that email or that phone call that says, hey, this is coming out and I know we've already got a plan in place and we're working on this, or hey, Johnny has had really fantastic attendance and he hasn't been missing much, but I noticed recently he's missed a lot. Is there something, going on that I can help support with? So making sure that you're personalizing that communication and having that family engagement to show that you are partners in this and not penalizing anyone. And then make sure your teachers know what are those warning signs for increased attendance issues. And then what are your processes? So if an email is supposed to go out at day 5 from your teacher, make sure they know that and then follow up on that so that we are hitting those kids early before it gets to be a bigger problem. And then make sure you're monitoring your attendance regularly and celebrating improvements. We don't necessarily need to have perfect attendance awards. Those really do more harm than good over time. But if you see students that are improving their attendance, let's recognize that and let's celebrate that strength and that improvement. And also when we talk about engaging families, if you have been on our Coffee Connects, we just did one on family engagement. The recording is or will be on our website if you want to check that out if you missed it. But here are just a few key points. Engaging families early, and this is, I feel like this is twofold. So engaging families early in elementary, but also engaging families early in the school year. So we want our students and our families to start off with positive school experiences, especially for our families who maybe didn't have such positive ones themselves. So if you get kids that are coming in that early elementary, and you can build that family engagement and they feel like they are partners and that they are seen as the experts in their children's lives, I'm going to build that relationship and that trust over time, so that when an issue does arise or when a family might need support, they're more likely to reach out or accept that support. And then same with early in the year. So again, like if you're noticing something's different from this year to last year, or this month to last month, starting that conversation with families so that they are aware and that you can have those conversations and feel like partners in moving forward. Goes along with that, establishing that positive relationship. Let them know the good things, celebrate those improvements, celebrate their strengths. If a parent, usually if a student gets there late 4 days a week, and this week they were on time, 4 of the days, so they were only tardy 1 day, celebrate that. Gosh, that's really great. I saw that you got your kiddo here on time. Like, what was different? How did that go? Celebrate those strengths and establish that positive relationship. Again, ties in a strengths-based approach, and then offer that support when needed. So when you have that relationship built and there are positive conversations that are happening between the school and the family, and they're not just negative things, again, they're more likely to accept or ask for support when needed. A big thing that we talk about is that school climate. So do students feel that the environment is safe and supportive and engaging for them? We covered all of that in that. And so how can we do that? And we are social emotional behavioral learning specialists. We believe that SEBL is at the core of really climate and how schools function and how we help support our kids. And so we've adapted the CASEL competencies: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, social awareness, and relationship skills. And when you build that throughout the different systems of your classrooms, your schools, within your families and caregivers, and in your communities, the better your climate and your culture will be in your school. And our students and our families come with their own life experiences, their own social emotional behavioral learning. And so when they walk in the door, that affects your culture, but also your climate and your culture. If you have a positive environment that they feel safe and engaged and connected, that's going to impact their experiences and their social emotional behavioral learning as well. These are the competencies just broken out a little bit further into some of those skills. We recognize that the competencies are kind of a construct and these higher arching ideas. And so we wanted to break these skills out a little bit further. Again, if you've been in our Coffee Connects last spring, we took each of these and broke them down even further. Those are on the website for you as well. But just all of these skills are things that we all want our students and our adults to be able to do and to have and to foster to be happy, healthy humans. This is adapted from the National Center for Safe and Supportive Environments and breaks down those areas of climate just a little bit further into relationships, respect for diversity, that school participation, safety, emotional, physical, and safe from substance use within the schools. And then the environment is safe physically. It has a positive academic environment. Wellness is a focus, and then the disciplinary environment as well. The biggest piece of climate and culture is those relationships that are happening within the school walls and within the community. So when teachers are able to prioritize relationships and focus on the quality of connections with their kids, we see over and over again that teachers feel more effective, the kids are more engaged, and they are able to learn more and feel more effective themselves. So how do we do that? Here we have 10 ways to build relationship with kids. I like it. It is a simple and to the point, and really things that we want everybody to be doing, so peers to peers and educators to their students and educators to their other educators and their coworkers. We've also included the link to the 3 social emotional behavioral learning practices that we've adapted from CASEL. And those include the welcoming inclusion activities like we did at the beginning here to really get a pulse on your class or your staff and how they're coming in that day, help build some of those relationships and those connections among each other, engagement strategies to keep things moving and some transition time, and then optimistic closure. So how are you closing out meetings, or how are you closing out content or a class, and how are your students and your staff feeling about that? We've talked about family engagement and a little bit about extracurriculars, but really focusing on the needs and the wishes of the students within your building. So offering things like a knitting club if you have a group of students that likes to knit, and yearbook club, and finding like these students are already gathering and they're already doing the things that they enjoy. So how can we, take that and grow that even bigger and make a space for them to do that within the schools? And we know that sometimes you have to think out of the box, especially if you're in rural areas and maybe it's an after school club, but the buses stop running at 4 o'clock. And so are there ways to build that into your mornings, over lunch, into advisory periods? So working within your school and your own individual characteristics and finding where that fits best. But if you value this, there is a way to do that, and your students will only benefit from that as well. Using community-based partnerships, and this, we talked about this in family engagement, how closely it ties in because your families work in your community most often. And so if you can pull on the expertise or the connections you already have with the parents and the families of your students, that's even better. So we talked about, like, if you have a parent who enjoys doing yoga or is a yoga teacher, perhaps they can come in after school and do a club for that. So you get some family engagement, you get community partnerships, you get a club for your students. So 3 things through one simple connection that you've made. And then that your professional development should also hit the needs of your students and your staff. So asking them, where do they feel that they have some gaps, or where do they really want to build their knowledge, and providing professional development that fits that as well. Also want to make sure that we are using the right language. So many times we can get frustrated and it's the morning and your kids are trickling in, you're trying to get your stuff started, and it's easy to say something with a tone that maybe you did not mean, or maybe you did mean, but can we flip that? So instead of saying things like where were you? Jill, if you'll click. Just saying, I'm happy you're here. You don't need to know all of the details, just welcome them in. I'm happy you're here. If they're, walking in the hallways after the bell has rung, instead of yelling at them to get to class, you can simply say something like, thanks for being here. Ooh, which one is next? I think, well, look who it is. We'll have to see. Do you need anything? You're late. Instead of just saying you're late, you're back. And moving on and letting that be it. Or you've missed 2 tests when they walk into your class, you can ask them. Oh, you can say I've missed you. So just a simple flip of the language lets them know, okay, it's okay to be here. I think so. Back in my work, I had seen so often kids would miss a couple days or even a day, and they know they missed a test. And so then they'd feel so anxious about coming back and having a teacher be like, well, you missed this, or were you, or what was happening? And so then they'd skip the next day because they were anxious about the first day, and then they're 4 days in, and then it's 100 times worse. So if we can just make that first comeback easier for them and reduce some of that anxiety, I think we'll see more kids coming back more frequently. And then practicing that supportive discipline. So, it's easy to get caught up in the negative and it's easy to get frustrated, but when we really focus on that supportive discipline and we focus on rebuilding relationships and rebuilding trust, our students are going to, again, feel more connected and feel that they belong, and that school is, while it might not be their favorite place to be, it's not the worst place to be, and they have a purpose in coming every day.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. All right, so Emily really focused on some of those tier one, those core practices. So things that we can do within our buildings, within our schools to really support all students and create that welcoming just place for them to be. And talking a little bit about that school connectedness piece, talking a little bit about those school activities, that family engagement, that community engagement. So taking those pieces and really just continuing to build on those for our students that may be struggling with attendance. So we're going to move into just talking a little bit about those tier two, those targeted practices. And we're thinking about those are going to be things that we're doing in addition to those tier one, those core practices. So not things that we're doing instead of, but things that we're doing in addition to. So things like support through mentoring. So that might be an adult mentor, that might be a peer role model, like a positive peer role model mentor as well for some students that are struggling with attendance. Maybe it's offering a meeting just to sit down with families and really talk through what is it that we can do to help support you so that we can work together as a school team, as a family team. That might be a meeting that's virtual. That might be a meeting that maybe it's at their house, maybe it's at the school, but really being open to all of those different ways to have those conversations. Emily touched on this a little bit when we're talking about those tier one supports, but really thinking about and looking at those student strengths and those student interests. How can we really utilize those things to leverage that, engaging them in that school environment and really utilizing those things to get them in that door or help support them in other ways. Tailoring those physical and mental health supports as well, really offering those supports, creating those links to help support those students and those families. Providing those academic supports for struggling students, providing that safe place where students can go when they're feeling stressed or when they're feeling overwhelmed. That might be an office space, that might be a particular classroom, that might be somewhere in the hallway, wherever it might be that student identifies as kind of their safe place, that maybe they just need to go for a little break, or maybe they're feeling overwhelmed with a particular class or a certain time of the day, but allowing them that safe place and allowing them that safe space to really take that break so we can continue to help support them along the way. Showing that sensitivity to students who might have that performance anxiety, especially. So maybe reducing that need for, maybe if there's a speech in an English class, maybe it's just that they're giving that speech for just that teacher, or maybe that teacher and a trusted friend. Maybe it's that they're doing it before school or after school or whatever it might be, but really digging into what it is that might be preventing them from coming in those school doors or going to a particular class. Maybe it's just an alternative test taking environment that they're needing to support them as well. Working to develop those individual attendance plans. So we talked about having those meetings with families and having those conversations with families, but really working out those attendance plans together and what that might look like. Using data, so definitely taking a look at the data that we have available as we're looking at what might be the reason behind that student's difficulty with attendance. So maybe taking a look at those counselor office visits, health office visits, things like that. So again, taking a look at the data that we have at our fingertips. And then again, just developing those attendance plans, but with the families. That communication piece is key. So we just have an example here of that problem-solving model, but also that student support team. So using that data to make decisions, but that communication is key, and having that also that point of contact. So we're not reaching out to those families, whether it be via email or phone calls or meetings, things like that, from multiple people within the building. Really having that open communication and letting each other know, what we've done, who is reaching out, how we are working together to support those students. So oftentimes we have a lot of different supports available for students, but we need to ensure that each of those supports is communicating with the next, right? That we're working together. We're really systematically addressing that. We're not working in silos, right? And again, just really utilizing that data, like I had mentioned, that we have available. This is a great resource as we're working to develop those attendance plans. So some key things to remember that when we're really working to develop those plans for students, looking at their strengths, looking at their interests, looking at what those barriers to attendance might be. And Mackenzie had touched on some of those earlier. So what is preventing this student from coming to school? Are there unmet needs that we need to look at? That individualization is key, okay? We really need to think about what's going on with each particular student. You know, having those problem-solving meetings, having those discussions with the team, and really understanding the root causes for student absenteeism, which is this worksheet that can also kind of help with those conversations. There's some different questions on there that can help identify some different causes for that absenteeism, and looking at that chronic absence, and really looking at that root cause. So again, when we're looking at developing those attendance plans, looking at strengths, looking at interests, looking at those unmet needs, and looking at what some barriers might be. I think both Emily and Mackenzie had touched on this just a little bit, but thinking outside the box. So when we're thinking about different ways to improve student attendance, sometimes we just have to get creative. We have to think outside the box to really work to utilize the resources that we might have, engaging those families, engaging those community partners, and working to utilize the student strengths and interests to support them. So just a couple examples we wanted to throw out there when we're thinking about just different ways to get creative. So for secondary students especially, so really thinking about having them complete some different interest surveys, having those conversations about what their post-secondary goals are. What is it that they want to do when they're done with high school? Thinking about how we can kind of leverage those pieces and utilize those as maybe an elective credit option. So maybe partnering with some community businesses, some community partners to set up some like work sites or some job sites opportunities, get them the opportunity to be able to kind of practice some of those skills that they do want to do post-secondary. Maybe it's a student that really loves working on cars or is just really interested in cars. Maybe they want to be a mechanic after high school. Maybe they just want to work in an auto shop, but maybe there's a local auto shop or somebody that works on cars within the community. How can we work with them to get that student some different experiences and maybe get them kind of setting those goals for that post-secondary, earning those elective credits potentially by working on some of those pieces. Maybe it's a student that's really interested in working with kids. Maybe there's a before and after school program as part of the district. Maybe there's a local daycare. How could we maybe partner with them to get them some experiences working with kids or volunteering at the local daycare? Again, really kind of leveraging those post-secondary pieces. You know, for younger students, it might be setting up like a breakfast club. It might be identifying some positive peer role models that they meet with, maybe outside of the school in the morning, where they meet and walk into school together. Maybe it's they meet for breakfast or they meet for lunch. Maybe it's a student that's struggling with attendance, but they really enjoy helping others. Maybe we can pair them with a student who maybe has a more significant disability as kind of a peer buddy. Lots of different ways to just kind of think outside the box and how we can support students and getting them through that door. Kind of a more tier 1 example, but I did want to throw this out here as well. Something that we've had some schools do in the past is create like a spreadsheet with all of the different students that are in their building and having staff either fill out like a Google form or fill out that sheet where they're identifying some different student interests, student strengths, maybe things that are unique to that particular student. And then as a team, kind of taking a look at maybe some students that don't have things filled out, that staff members did not go in and, you know, complete those strengths or those interests or those unique things, and trying to pair them up with an adult mentor to just kind of get to know them better. A lot of times that might kind of point out some of those students that we need to build more connections with. We maybe need to get to know a little bit better, but something like that could be utilized in so many different ways, and something that could also be useful if we have those students that are struggling later on with attendance. Mackenzie or Emily, did you guys have any other just examples of that thinking outside the box?
I always like to share this one. We had a student who obviously struggled with attendance, so that's why we're talking about today. But she really liked plants, and so the one part of her attendance plan was if she was at school, she got to help grow and water and care for her plants. So at the beginning of the semester, we started with some seeds, and then she grew them, and they were in the assistant principal's office. And then by the end of the semester, we had to send them home with her because they were too big they were like bigger than the window in the office. Which yes, watering the plants was great, and she loved it, and she was so excited, and she got to look forward to it. But then it was also the opportunity for her to come into the office, have conversations with the assistant principal. I got to talk with her school counselor, like really whoever was in the office, she got to engage in those conversations. And so it really hit on that relationship piece, while also playing into what are her strengths and her interests, and something that might motivate her to come to school. So I thought that was creative.
Perfect. Thanks, Mackenzie. We wanted to give you guys just a little opportunity, because I'm sure you've had things that you have created as part of kind of those attendance plans, things that you guys have done for students to help support them. So just as kind of a little idea exchange, so we have created a Padlet. So what are some different strategies that you've used in the past that were successful? So we did create a Padlet. The password for it is capital MTSS. If you guys want to drop some ideas in there, if you would rather just share out loud, that is totally fine too. Or if you want to put some in the chat, that works, and we can add them to the Padlet. But we'd love to just have a resource for others to be able to go to as just kind of an idea exchange. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share?
I will. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Kayla.
So one of the things that we did for our kiddos is we actually bought a bunch of alarm clocks and provided them to the kids. Another thing that we did that we didn't realize it would help us with attendance is we bought a bunch of bike locks. And it helped our kids feel safe about leaving their bikes outside. And then that just provided them another way to get to school on time.
Yes, love it.
Hi, Jill. This is Cami with the Omaha Public Schools. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Just thinking about school-wide, a lot of our schools have started to do pop-up parties. And so they'll just go into a classroom, and whoever's in attendance, they, take 30 seconds, a minute, some way to just celebrate who's in attendance. And then the kids are so excited about it that they're like waiting for that next time to come, and maybe they play music and they just dance, because we have to always think about the cost of things, right? At the middle school level, we've even had middle schools where they just announced 7th graders, need to come to the gym. And then they have these great big celebrations for whoever's in attendance. And then the kiddos are waiting for when it's going to happen, like the other grade levels. In fact, I remember, I had a mom who kept calling me saying, I need you to tell me when the pop-up party is going to be. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know. I would love to tell you. And she said, well, we have a dentist appointment. If they have the pop-up party, say on October 16th, and she's not there, she's going to be devastated. So it really just things to really catch their attention and really just celebrate the kiddos who are here and in that moment. But there's also different ways. Right now is Attendance Awareness Month. And so for all of our schools that are tweeting specifically about students who are striving for 95 and students who are recognized for attendance, I'm writing individual thank you notes and sending those out. And we have bracelets that are, they change with heat and cold. And then just recognizing whoever, whether it's the whole 3rd grade class, it's Miss, Pakota's 3rd grade class, or it's individual students, and just really trying to let the kiddos know that we appreciate that they are in attendance. And then typically that always gets back to the parents. And then the parents, are thankful for that. So those are just a couple ideas that we're doing in the Omaha Public Schools currently.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love the pop-up parties. How fun. Well, perfect. That Padlet will be open if you guys want to drop in any of those ideas. Again, just as a resource for others as well, and maybe something that you can gain some ideas from as well. So as far as those community partnerships and really thinking about those and continuing to partner with our community, we just wanted to remind like that engage, link, and create. So engaging those community organizations and supports, being able to link families with those community resources and supports, and then really creating those community-based experiences for students. Kind of moving into some tier 3 intensified supports. So things like maybe looking at flexible school day options, maybe it's a late start and early release. Maybe it's considering that part-time schooling for students that really have those extended absences that have, kind of been a continuous problem. So over 2 years, really thinking about maybe we need to look at some just different types of school day options for students, and then just continuing to progressively increase what we're looking at for attendance. So just kind of thinking about also what are some things that we can do to, again, kind of get creative to support students when we're thinking about those intensified supports. This is just a video, so it's called Under the Surface, but we wanted to share this with you just because it's a nice video that really gets us thinking. It's just a good reminder that we have no idea what's going on with the others that we interact with each and every day. We don't know what's happening with our students outside of the school day. We don't know what maybe has happened before they walk in our doors. And so we wanted to share this video with you. So give me a thumbs up if sound is working okay. So really thinking about our approach and our response to each situation. So we wanted to also just provide you guys, if you're looking for some additional resources, we have a full page here of just some different resources. They are also linked in that Padlet. So if you clicked on that link, they are available there as well. This is another one, so a PBIS resource, and like Kami had mentioned, it is Attendance Awareness Month, so September is Attendance Awareness Month, and this is just a great resource from PBIS as well, so we have that one linked in there. As part of our optimistic closure. So really just thinking about maybe one of these things, maybe all three of these things, but what's one thing that you found important, what squares with your thinking, or what continues to circle in your mind? If you guys would want to just drop one of those in the chat, again, you might just answer one of them. You can certainly answer all three. And then we also on this slide, we have just a QR code as well as a link for an evaluation form if you guys would like to complete that as well. Again, I would encourage you guys to go back to that Padlet. We'll try to put some other ideas or things that were shared in the chat as well in that Padlet as just another resource for you guys. All right, we'll let you guys continue to drop those in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any other questions or anything that you have, you can certainly reach out to us, and thanks for joining us.